The purpose of life is to love and be loved.
Welcome to the Sage Words Podcast, infusing empathy and wisdom into universal challenges. In this episode of Sage Words, I'll share a bit of my personal experience creating mentorship between an impoverished household and a wealthy family to narrow the gap of income inequities. I'll also cover some misconceptions about universal basic income, welfare, and food stamps that may provide reason for looking at government assistance in a different way. An expanded perspective, this podcast is a long one, clocking in around 35 minutes. So listen on the commute, while preparing dinner, or on a lovely walk. It may spark your wheels to begin turning, especially as you remember the power of one. Wealth, higher income than we deserve for opportunities we're lucky enough to have. April 8th, 2022, Sage Justice. When I hear people say, "It's not my problem," I think of the phrase, "ignorance is bliss." How easily we forget the expression, "There but for the grace of God go I." Even if we're not religious, we know that suffering comes to all and that no one is an island unto themselves. We need each other. We need interdependence to survive. Just because something isn't our personal problem doesn't mean it's not a problem we unconsciously helped to create through the ignorance of privilege, or that it can't be solved once we make a conscious choice to become enlightened enough to be willing to change. That's the problem with saying, "It's not my problem." When people replace empathy with apathy, they take on the mentality of every man for himself. The political polarization has ingrained in us a prevailing divide and conquer attitude that has created the illusion of otherness, of us versus them. When we have lost our ability to see ourselves in others, we have bowed down to the false idol of separateness, forgetting that we are one. Too much confidence can impede humility, and we forget how big a role privileges play in making us who we are. Some people can't imagine that they too could become disabled, fall into addiction, mental illness, or financial disarray, and that if they did, how alone they would feel, how much they would hurt and need to be helped. They take their physical, mental, emotional, and financial health for granted. They see others suffering and think, "That would never be me. I'd never allow myself to fall so far, and if I did, my family would be there to lift me up." But life can change in a nanosecond. Many of the defining moments of our lives are beyond our control. People who have it all can lose it all. Wealthy and famous athletes have had traumatic brain injuries from sports, car accidents, or fights that left their mental health impaired. Bad investments, economic crashes, and natural disasters can wipe away a person's wealth in an instant. Family members can die or become too dysfunctional to engage with and maintain contact. Humans forget the impermanence and fragility of life. Fred Rogers is quoted as saying, "We live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say, 'It's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem.' Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes." We do not all begin on the same starting line in life. The hardest workers I've ever known have often been single mothers who hold down multiple jobs and work around the clock on minimum wage and without benefits. We falsely think that our financial stability is due to our own hard work and not through a series of privileges that got us there. Wealth is not just the result of hard work. It's the result of opportunity to receive a higher income than we likely deserve for the work that we are lucky enough to do. We all deserve to be paid not only for our skill level, but also for our time. We do not all begin on the same starting line in life with the same resources, be they financial stability, loving family, or health and wellness, to say nothing of skin color or gender. In an equitable world, every human being would be given the same chance for success, or the same experiences of loss, trauma, and tragedy. Not to make us all carbon copies of each other, but to build a platform of equity that supports diversity, equal opportunities, and human understanding. We would have compassion for each other and more deeply comprehend the concept of spiritual oneness. Our goal would be to treat each other as we treat those we value most. Most people may be doing their best, but most people are still inherently flawed. We live in a world of imperfect human beings who are conditioned and rewarded for functioning on diets of polite lies, phony pleasantries, and selfish greed. Nothing hurts quite like a nice person who doesn't really care. The solution is to set aside the justifiable anger of the inequitable world we live in, to focus on the reality that it's more important to get people the help that's needed than it is to be right about how wrong others may have been. We can make this world a better place. The richest people of the world could end poverty today if they would openly share and disseminate their knowledge of wealth, be it literally via donations or by sharing the belief systems, practices, and mindsets that help create and maintain their wealth. If you have enough wealth to judge the poor, why not mentor a family and show them the way out instead? A friend of mine and her sister, who know much more about money management than I, were kind enough to do that for my family and me. And because they taught us from where we were versus where they were, we were able to take steps to change our financial situation. The process of applied learning to our personal situation helped in a way that other methods, such as consulting financial advisors at banks, reading books on money management, and studying every abundance guru, did not. When wealthy people actually sit with someone poor and look at their expenses, skill sets, and income on paper, they can offer practical advice and baby steps that can be applied immediately. This helps the wealthy to better understand both the specific struggles of the poor and the assets low-income individuals have that can help them elevate their own financial status. From there, the wealthy can utilize their high-level access to illuminate a path to help low-income people to improve their lives. Before we encourage the impoverished to just learn about finances by watching YouTube videos, we could ask whether they even have access to a computer or the internet. Books on money management are built on the premise that one has access to an income to manage, and therefore are often useless to those trying to dig their way out of deep poverty. Help those in need find the time to make change and incorporate the suggestions you offer. Imagine if you worked 12 hours a day outside of the home, then another 12 hours inside the home as a caregiver to a parent or a child. When would you find time for self-improvement? If the money you earned only covered the lowest cost food and shelter, how would you save money? Put yourself in their shoes, and using empathy and experience, share with them how you would handle the situation with their limited resources. Some may think that people who are poor should simply get a job that pays more, but for many, that isn't a viable option. Show them how to do that from where they are. Solve the puzzle as if it were your own, and in the process, teach them to do the same. If you think the solution to all their problems is the law of attraction, then teach them the secret. Just remember, the time to teach someone how to avoid injury is not when they are in the process of bleeding to death. First, we stop the bleeding. Then, we teach how to prevent injury in the first place. After you share your wisdom, share your money, because a handout can be a hand up. A little extra money each month from someone who has it to give can make a significant difference, particularly when it's in combination with mentorship. We need each other. We are an interdependent society. In the immortal words of Ashford and Simpson presented to us by the great diva Diana Ross, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place if you can. Our daily bread. The hypocrisy of any Christians who hoard their wealth is mind-boggling. For the Bible says, "Give us this day our daily bread." It doesn't say, "Give us this day our daily bread and tomorrow's bread, and more bread than we can eat in a lifetime, while others go hungry and live off the moldy crumbs of waste bread." A universal basic income, a UBI, is designed to provide people with their daily bread. To believe that something like a universal basic income would make people too lazy to want to work is to be ignorant of just how little the proposed UBI would cover of basic living expenses, and short-sighted on what it means to be, quote, lazy, end quote. Stephanie Land's memoir, Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive, which was adapted into the Netflix series Made, illustrates how even with a full-time job and pursuit of a degree, it can take up to 7 forms of governmental assistance just to survive. If you earn a penny over the poverty line, you can lose benefits. But that penny, dollar, or even $1,000 more won't compensate for the loss of benefits like health insurance. This can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for someone with a chronic medical condition. The more the haves retreat from the have-nots, the more desperate the have-nots become, crying out in anguish, in sincere pain and suffering. The haves watch from a distance, as they would watch a building go up in flames, too fearful of getting burned themselves if they were to get close enough to actually help. Yet the more the haves run from the truth that their privilege is what protects them, not any superior inherent worth or supreme work ethic, the more they run from those who are in need, and the more those who are in need feel abandoned and lash out with the only thing they feel they have, rage. Is it any wonder at all when people burn down their own neighborhoods if the only way their story of suffering reaches the news is by lighting themselves on fire? It's expensive to be poor. Wealthy people earn more in income than they need for basic survival. Even the upper middle class earn an excess they could put towards saving for major purchases in case of emergency. In contrast, the monthly income for the working class rarely covers their basic survival necessities. They often have no choice but to use credit cards to pay for food, shelter, transportation, services, and goods. While the wealthy are often gifted items for free, the poor can end up paying much more for an item than the original cost. It can take years to pay off credit card debt, decades, particularly if all one can afford is to make minimum payments on interest, while barely whittling down the principal. While the wealthy are taught the value of compound interest to make money off the money they already have, the only interest the poor are taught about is the interest they accrue through debt. If working class people are lucky enough to start earning more money, then they reach a point at which government aid gets cut off. This stops them from having discretionary money that can be used to pay off their debts. By using an on-off switch for benefits, the system sets poor people up to remain poor. The only way out is from opportunity by those who have an excess to give and offer a hand up, and civic engagement to change the system. When average Americans working minimum wage jobs are not given enough hours to qualify for benefits, they are not earning enough money to cover their basic living expenses, let alone save for a vacation. In fact, even those on welfare do not get a free ride. California has a welfare-to-work program called CalWorks, which limits the lifetime of welfare to 4 years total, or 48 months over a lifetime. In order to receive the monthly check, one is often required to fill out a mountain of paperwork every 3 months, show proof of the jobs they have applied for every pay cycle, and either do community service work like pick up trash on the side of the road, or be enrolled in trade school or some other form of continued education. There are some exceptions, like being a full-time caregiver or having a disability. But being determined by the state to be disabled can require years of paperwork, red tape, and the testimonials of multiple doctors. Not only that, but if at the time of your first of the month scheduled deposit from welfare you have $3,000 or more in your checking account, you will not receive any money. According to 2022 data acquired by rentdata.org, the fair market rent in California can reach $3,553 for a 2-bedroom unit in San Francisco. Rent Cafe cites the average monthly rent for a 3-bedroom apartment in California is $4,079. Add utilities, food, and other essential expenses to that, and without $3,000 saved, in addition to the welfare check, there will not be enough money to cover basic expenses. The next logical question is, why would someone choose to live in a state with rent so high? To which I would pose the ethical question, do we want to create states that are so expensive only the most elite can live there? Should people be forced to leave their family, friends, careers, and community because they can no longer afford to live where they were born and raised? Rent is rising everywhere in the country. The answer is not to push all the poor people out of California, but rather to create affordable housing everywhere in the country. Unfortunately, people cling to tired old cliches about welfare and opinions that it makes people lazy without any research to back it up. The fact remains that we are living in a time when the cost of living is greater than the living wage. Even food stamps on top of welfare without being allowed to save money is not enough to cover basic survival expenses. To determine eligibility for food stamps, also known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, their website states, quote, generally a family must be at or below 130% of the poverty line. For a family of 3, the poverty line used to calculate SNAP benefits in federal fiscal year 2022 is $1,830 a month. Thus, 130% of the poverty line for a 3-person family is $2,379 a month, or about $28,550 a year. Now, how can the average family making less than $3,000 a month afford the average rent of over $4,000 a month? we have a very real and serious affordable housing crisis. Poverty requires hustle. I've never met a poor person who was lazy. Now, that doesn't mean they don't exist. I'm sure they are made of the same stuff that produces the people who do nothing more than lounge on their parents' yacht as they travel the world. Laziness is a character trait, not a bank statement. It's found in the affluent and the impoverished alike and has nothing to do with money. An inheritance is not hard-earned money. There are bums in every income bracket. Most people, however, take pride in working. Unfortunately, poor people aren't allowed the luxury of leisure without admonishment and accusations of being lazy. Social construct dictates that our short, magical time on this planet should be devoted to working ourselves into the ground to survive. Unless we achieve celebrity status, then we're not only allowed leisure, but encouraged to parade the extravagance of a life well lived. Don't we all deserve to have some leisure in our lives? Orange County is home to Disneyland, touted as the happiest place on earth. And yet within walking distance of Disneyland is a motel filled with homeless children who will likely never see the inside of that happy place. These aren't children of irresponsible parents. Many of these parents work multiple jobs. In the documentary Homeless, the Motel Kids of Orange County, we meet a mother of 4 who is a nurse who works with cardiac patients. I wouldn't call that lazy. The public trusts her with the care of our hearts, and yet she doesn't earn enough to live anywhere else other than a motel for homeless families. The wealthy must campaign on behalf of those who do not have access to an audience of privilege as they do. Every person above the median income has a moral obligation to devote consistent time and resources to humanitarian heroism, which is securing survival necessities, clean water, nutrient-dense food, shelter, medical care, education, and safety. For those at or below the poverty line in their own country. Lead Me Home is a 40-minute film that gives a brief insight into poignant stories of homelessness in this surging humanitarian crisis. This isn't about problems far and away. This is about homelessness literally in one's own backyard, as is the case with Southern California beach communities, where opulent investment or vacation homes remain empty for most of the year, while houseless people live in tents right outside their doors. In United Shades of America, W. Kamau Bell reminds us that, quote, Skid Row is not a row. It's a 50-block area between 3rd and 7th, Alameda and Main, the largest permanent population of the homeless in the entire country, where there are 60,000 homeless people surrounded by 110,000 empty housing units. End quote. It's a deplorable and reprehensible crime to support a social structure that pays athletes, celebrities, and industries that create them more money than they will ever need, while ignoring the massive, growing homeless population that's filled with families like our own, who do not fit the false narrative that all houseless people are drug addicts or derelicts. In the 1960s, a phrase was coined by Darley and Lathan called bystander apathy, to describe when a community takes their cue from the crowd as to whether they should intercede in a situation of injustice. Oftentimes, the difference between a person who has the courage to take a stand and one who seemingly doesn't is prior knowledge or experience with the type of situation presenting itself. I have personal experience with the situation of inequity presenting itself. Listen to the people around you who have experience and not just personal platitudes. If you're not the first person to stand, may you have the courage to stand next to the person who does rise, for no one can carry a burden alone. How do we know who and when to help? There are so many people who need help. How can we possibly help everyone in need? We can't. We start where we are, and with the most pressing issues of personal safety and survival. If every person had a home to call their own, and cash subsidies to help create equity as in money for childcare, many of the subsequent charitable needs would be resolved before they became a problem. Part of how we discern who to help, all things being equal, is to first realize all things are not equal. Yes, our precious money is ours to call our own and donate to whatever charity or help whichever person we choose, but not all of them reach out to us directly, and not all needs are equal. I live largely by my interpretation of the principles in The Three Questions, a story by Leo Tolstoy, which basically asks the philosophical questions. 1, what is the most important thing to do? 2, when is the most important time to do it? And 3, who is the most important person to do it with? Spoiler alert, the answers are 1, whatever presents itself. 2, the moment of now. And 3, whomever you are with. Above all, doing anything is better than doing nothing. At the very least, offer the person who is suffering empowering encouragement. It takes such minimal effort to lift another up through the simple act of encouragement. It takes so little time and energy to remind each other of who we are: intelligent, brave, resourceful, and resilient. Our greatest asset is the inherent strength of the human spirit. We can easily be a voice to those who are suffering, that while they may be on their own, they are not struggling alone. For many people struggle. Sometimes just having our challenges acknowledged can give us the strength to keep going. As a witness to the pain of another, we might say, it's true. People are not showing up for you, so you have no choice but to show up for yourself. When we show up for ourselves, it doesn't mean we don't still need help from others. The takeaway here is that as long as we have ourselves, we are never alone. There is empowerment and learning that we can do hard things on our own. My own life experience has shown me that when we show up for ourselves, people actually start showing up for us more. When we start looking for the best in ourselves, in others, and in life, we often experience the best in ourselves, in others, and in life. We have to dig deep within, past the pain of suffering and loss, and find that core of survival. Find a way to parent ourselves. Find the love we give to animals, children, and the elderly, and others who we see who are in need, and give that same love and compassion to ourselves. Sometimes we have no one else in the world to turn to beside ourselves. And that's when we can remember the sentiments of Audrey Hepburn, that we have two hands, one for helping others, the other for helping ourselves. With encouragement and a little help from those around us, we find a way to rise again. Like many Americans, we still live with housing insecurity. Is this the price we pay for freedom? Medical and financial hardships should not equate to the loss of a home. In an inequitable social structure, when people become disabled or choose to live with integrity, call out corruption and speak truth to power, sacrificing their financial security, or depend on the gig commerce for income sans benefits, or are talented artists who follow their dreams, they may never earn enough money to own a home. In the richest country in the world, homelessness is a shameful mark on all of humanity. We can change that with legislation, with civic engagement, and social restructuring. You can help by changing your perspective. The popular trope is that success results from meritocracy, that hard work and education alone are what determine wealth. And that's just not true. No one has ever called me lazy. In fact, what I hear much more often from friends and family is, "You work too hard." When I was in the traditional workforce, I maintained multiple streams of income simultaneously and continued to do so as a working mother and caregiver to an elderly family member. When I was no longer able to work in a conventional sense because of my health, I wrote over a dozen books while bedridden. Hard work alone does not equate to wealth. And education alone is not what earns us a higher paying job. It's the degree and the letters which follow our name that count, not necessarily the education behind it. I've attended upwards of 20 educational institutions and certificate programs, including free classes online from Ivy League schools like Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. Online education may be free, but to earn a degree, one must pay for the credits, which is to say that a college graduate is not necessarily someone who has paid for an education. A college graduate is someone who has paid for a degree. Education alone does not equate to wealth. If we are paid for the value we produce, but we were born into only a 50-seat theater of influence, the audience exposed to our value is small in number. So too is our income until we increase our audience. We increase our audience through the support of those who were born into the larger 5,000-seat theaters with more tushies filling the seats with thicker wallets in those pant or purse pockets. Value alone does not equate to wealth. We create wealth by lifting each other up. Even though I have yet to own a home, I know compared to others, I still have privilege. I've used my voice to raise the volume for those who have no audience, like the houseless community the ePath.org organization serves. And I humbly ask those who have an audience greater than my own to raise the voice of this newsletter or my most recent book, and if my words ring with truth and resonate. That's where the average person has the most power. Their social media contacts and their ability to spread messages of solutions and inspiration from artists and writers like myself. Equality starts with equity, which begins with one hand lifting another so that the value we each have is able to be seen by the largest audience possible. Toni Morrison is quoted as saying, "When you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower someone else." Thank you for listening. This has been an excerpt from the book Sage Words, Freedom, Book 1, available on Amazon, or as a thank you gift, to founding subscribers. Your support of this newsletter, books by this author, and her YouTube channel, Sage Words, almost everything you need to know, are greatly appreciated and directly help sustain her family. Thank you.
With confidence, add sage words and common sense, dear daughter. My love for you is